You look at them and see someone untouched, still smiling, still functioning, still moving through their days as if nothing was ever owed. They post the pictures. They keep the friends. They carry the same certainty that once made you question your own memory. And that is the part that has been hardest to hold. You have watched it up close. They walk into a room and it still opens for them. They tell their version and people still nod. Meanwhile, you became the one who looks tired, the one who seems bitter, the one asked why you cannot simply let it go. Because after everything they did, part of you expected the truth to leave a mark you could see. You expected the judgment to arrive the way it does in stories. You expected the person who took your peace to visibly lose theirs. That is not where it begins. God saw what happened. He saw the version told behind the closed door and the version performed in the open. He did not miss one word of it. But his judgment does not always begin where human eyes have learned to look. Sometimes it begins somewhere quieter first. The first consequences are not loud. They are not humiliation, not ruin, not a collapse you could point to. What begins to change is smaller and far more permanent. A person can still look successful while losing the ability to enjoy any of it. They can still be admired while growing afraid of the moment it stops. That fear is not an accident. They do this to themselves because a life built on performance has to keep performing, and the performance is starting to fail. This is the judgment the title names, and this one they do not come back from. Understand what that means, because it is the whole reason you are here. There are people who fall and rebuild. There are people who are humbled and return. What is starting now is not that. What is cracking in them is the thing they used to repair everything else, and it does not grow back. God is not adding a punishment from the outside. He is doing something harder to survive. He is lowering the hand that held back what they built with their own choices. For years, that restraint looked like their strength. It was never their strength. It was mercy, holding the weight off a little longer, hoping they would turn. They did not turn. That time is ending, and what was held back is coming down. It does not come down all at once. It comes down in order, one piece at a time. Each piece takes something they cannot put back. You were never meant to carry the doubt while it did. So here is what the next hour holds. What follows is the order the cracks appear in. From the first one, almost no one notices, to the last one they will never rebuild. You will recognize them. You lived beside them. And there is one crack forming in them right now that they will never let anyone see. That is the one God saves for the end. If you have carried this in silence longer than anyone knew, there are 3 words that already belong to you. Write them where you can see them. God saw it, not for them. Let it stand as the thing you were never allowed to say out loud, that none of it went unwitnessed. The covering is coming off. It does not go back on. And what breaks in them this time was never yours to fix, and never yours to mourn. Number 1, the charm stops landings. The first thing to break is the thing they trusted most. Not their money, not their standing. Their charm. You have watched it work. You watched it for years. They walk into a room and something shifts toward them. The voice drops just right. The story lands just right. The eyes find the one person who needs to be won, and they win them. It looked like a gift. It was never a gift. It was a tool, and they were very good with it. Watch it now. They say the thing that always worked, and the room does not move. The line that used to earn a laugh sits in the air. The story that used to draw everyone in gets a polite nod and nothing more. Someone checks their phone. Someone changes the subject. The spell that never failed is failing in front of them, and they can feel it. They do not understand why. They do this because the charm was never connection. It was a performance aimed at a reaction. And a performance only works while the room believes the person giving it. The moment the belief thins, the same words become what they always were underneath. Practiced, hollow, a little too smooth to trust. Nothing about them changed. What changed is that people stopped filling in the gaps for them. That is the crack. It is small. Almost no one names it out loud, but they feel it before anyone else does, because they built their whole life on that reaction, and the reaction is going quiet. And here is what makes this one different from every hard season they ever survived. They have recovered from losses before. They lost jobs and charmed their way into better ones. They lost people and replaced them by the weekend. Every time, the tool still worked, so every time they came back. This is the first loss the tool cannot fix, because the tool is the thing that broke. You cannot charm your way out of losing your charm. That door does not reopen. Once a room has seen behind the performance, it does not unsee it. They can try harder. They can turn it up. Effort only makes it louder, and louder is worse. The harder they perform, the more the room notices they are performing. You have seen the version of them that turns it up, the louder laugh, the hand on the shoulder that used to land as warmth. The compliment aimed at the one person still on the fence, delivered with everything they have. Watch that person now not quite return the smile. Watch them step back half a step, the way you step back from someone standing too close. That half step is new. A year ago, it did not happen. The charm used to close that distance in a sentence. Now the sentence is making it wider. They can see it opening, and the only tool they have for closing it is the tool that is opening it. God is not doing anything loud here. He is lowering the weight. He once lent a voice that used it to wound. And the same room that voice used to command goes cold as he draws that weight back. The doors it once opened on command stay shut now. The hand that held them open was never theirs. It was his, and he is taking it back, one door at a time, starting with the one they would never have chosen to lose first. They would have protected the charm above everything. So of course it goes first. Now think about where you were in all of this. You saw it before the room did. You watched the same lines get used on different people. You heard the story change depending on who was listening. You noticed the warmth switch on when it was useful, and off the second it was not. And when you flinched, they told you that you were the problem. You were not the problem. You were early. You stood close enough to see the tool for what it was, years before the room caught up. What they called your bitterness was your clarity, working exactly as it should. You are not watching a surprise. You are watching everyone else arrive where you have been standing alone. That is not something to grieve. That is something being confirmed. The charm going quiet is the first proof that what you saw was real. It is small, and it is the beginning, and it does not reverse, but it is only the first crack, and the first is the gentlest one. Number 2, the stories stop matching. Once the charm stops covering for them, the words start to surface. And the words were never meant to be laid, side by side. They told a lot of stories. They had to. A person who manages people instead of loving them needs a different version for every room. One version for the family, one for the friends, one for the new person who does not know the history yet, one for you. Each version was built to work on the person in front of them, and each version was built to stay in its own room. That was the whole design. Keep the rooms apart. For years, it held. The family never compared notes with the old friends. The new person never sat down with the last one. You were kept at a distance from anyone who might have said the same thing you were starting to say. As long as no two versions ever met, every version stayed true enough to survive. Watch what happens now. The rooms start to open. Someone from one part of their life meets someone from another. A sentence gets repeated at the wrong table. A date does not line up. A story they told with total confidence turns out to contradict a story they told with equal confidence somewhere else. Nothing dramatic, just a small seam showing where two versions were sewn together and never meant to be seen at once. And someone pauses. That pause is the crack. It is the moment a person stops absorbing the story and starts noticing the shape of it. They do not accuse. They do not confront. They simply hold two things next to each other that were never supposed to touch, and they feel the edge where the two do not fit. They do this because a lie cannot survive comparison. A true account stays the same, no matter who hears it, because it is just describing what happened. A managed account has to shift, because it is not describing what happened. It is describing what the listener needs to believe. So the versions drift, each one bent toward a different room, and the drift is invisible until the rooms come together. Then the bends all show at once. The covering that kept the rooms apart is the covering God is lifting. He is not putting new words in their mouth. Every one of those versions is theirs. He is only removing the distance that kept them from being heard together. For years, something held the rooms at a careful angle, so the seams never lined up. That was never their skill. That was restraint being held over them, and the restraint is being withdrawn. The rooms are drifting into the same light, and the same light falls on every version at once. There is no story that survives that, and this is the crack they cannot perform their way out of, because performance needs a single audience. It needs one room, one version, one reaction to aim at. The moment two rooms are listening at the same time, there is no version that satisfies both, and there is no charm fast enough to bridge them. Whatever they say to one now contradicts what they already said to the other. Every repair opens a second tear. They built a house with no hallway between the rooms. Now the walls are coming down and everything is in view. Think about what this does for you. For years, you were the one who could not keep it straight, or so they said. You remembered a promise one way, and they told you it happened another way, and told it so smoothly that you began to distrust your own recall. You started writing things down. You started doubting a memory that was working perfectly the whole time. You were not confused. You were hearing one version while someone else was handed a different one, and being told yours was the mistake. The contradiction was never in your mind. It was in their account, split across rooms you were never allowed to compare. What is surfacing now is the proof you were denied. The seams you sensed and could not point to are becoming seams other people can see. You do not have to hold the two versions alone anymore. Others are starting to hold them too. And the thing you were called crazy for noticing is becoming the thing the room notices without your help. You never needed to win that argument. You only needed it to come into the light. And it is coming into the light on its own. Number 3, the defenders withdraw. The charm went first, then the stories stopped matching. Now the people go quiet. Every one of them had a circle, not friends exactly, an audience that answered. People who could be counted on to carry the message, defend the version, and put pressure on anyone who stepped out of line. When you tried to say what happened, it was often not them who answered you. It was the circle, the mutual friend who said you must have misunderstood, the relative who told you to be the bigger person, the voice that arrived to remind you how much everyone loved them. That circle was not loyalty, it was a function. They do this because a person who runs on reaction needs people positioned to supply it. The circle was recruited. Each one won the same way you were won. Each one handed a version built to keep them useful. As long as the charm worked and the stories held, the circle held with them. It looked like they were surrounded by people who believed in them. They were surrounded by people who had not yet compared notes. Now the notes are being compared. Watch what happens. No one makes a speech. No one announces they have changed their mind. It is quieter than that, and worse. A message sits unanswered a little longer than it used to. An invitation is not returned. The person who always jumped to defend them simply does not jump this time. The chair beside them at the table stays empty a few minutes into the meal, and then a few more, and then it becomes the way things are. The room does not turn on them. The room turns away. That silence is the crack, and it is a specific kind of pain for them, because they never learned to be with people who were not reacting. Presence without applause is a room they do not know how to stand in. They can survive being hated. Hatred is still attention, still a reaction to perform against. What they cannot survive is being unneeded. The slow, quiet withdrawal of people who have simply stopped finding them worth the effort. They will reach for the circle the way they always did. They will send the message that used to summon a defender. They will tell the story that used to move someone to their side. And this time the story lands in a silence, because the person on the other end has started to see the seams too. The tool that summoned people is out of reach now, for the same reason the charm is. Once a person sees the shape of what they were used for, they stop volunteering to be used. God is not turning the people against them. He is loosening his grip on a room he held together far past its time, and it empties the moment he lets go. Every chair that stays empty is a chair he is no longer keeping filled for them. For years, something kept that circle in orbit past the point it should have broken up. That was never the pull of a magnetic person. That was his hand, holding the room fuller than it had earned. Now the hand opens, and the room falls to its true size. An audience of no one is what the performance was always headed toward. Now think about the silence you were blamed for. For years, you were told you caused the distance. You were difficult. You were divisive. You were the reason things got tense, the reason people had to pick sides. You carried the guilt of a quiet you did not create. It was never your silence. It was theirs, arriving late. You did not empty that room. You just felt the cold in it before anyone else would admit the temperature. What is happening now is not your doing, and it is not yours to fix. It is the room returning to the truth of who was actually in it. You do not have to keep explaining yourself to people who are already beginning to see. Number 4, the harvest. Every tool they used on other people was built to point one way, outward, at you, at the room, at whoever needed managing. That was the only direction it ever ran. Now there is no one left to aim it at. So it turns around. Think about what those tools actually were, the confusion they created on purpose, so you could never get your footing. The way they rewrote a conversation until you were apologizing for something they did. The talent for keeping you slightly off balance, always reaching, never sure. They ran those tools on other people for so long that the tools became the only way their mind knows how to work. A mind like that never learned to sit still with itself. They do this because managing others was always easier than facing what was underneath. As long as there was someone to control, there was somewhere to put the noise. The whole machinery pointed outward, so it would never have to point home. Every reaction they pulled from you was a way of not being alone in their own head. Now the room is quiet, and the machinery keeps running. There is no one to confuse, so the confusion settles on them. There is no story left to spin, so the spinning turns inward on the one audience that cannot leave. The nights get longer. The mind that was always so quick at rearranging the truth for someone else starts rearranging it for no one, in the dark, on a loop. They reach for a piece they used to manufacture, and the machine that made it only makes noise now. Picture the hour they never had to face before. The house is quiet. There is no one to text into a reaction. There is no room to walk into and reset. There is no argument to start, so the noise has somewhere to go. Just them, and the ceiling, and a mind that only ever learned one job. So it does that job on the only target left. It replays the conversations and rewrites them, the way it used to rewrite them for you. Except now, there is no one to convince. There is nothing to win. It builds the case and argues it and loses it to itself at 3 in the morning every night. The loop does not end because the one person it is trying to fool already knows. That is the crack, and it is deep. This is not a place to linger, because the point is not their sleepless nights. The point is where those nights came from. This is not a sickness that fell on them from outside. It is a harvest. It is the exact crop they planted, coming up on a schedule they do not control. Scripture says it plainly. A man reaps what he sows. Whatever a person plants, that is what grows back. The confusion they sowed in you is the field they now lie awake in. The instability they handed you is the ground they now stand on. Nothing new was added to their life. What they spent years scattering simply came ripe. They did not believe that rule applied to them. They watched it apply to everyone else. They told themselves they were the exception, too clever, too quick, too good with a room to ever be caught by something as slow as cause and effect. That belief was the last thing holding the harvest off. And that belief is gone now, worn through by too many nights that no story can fix. God is not planting a new punishment in them. He spent years with his hand over the harvest, holding back the crop they kept sowing. And every season he held it. They read the quiet as proof they had won. That was never the verdict. It was the hand, still raised. Now he lowers it, and what they planted comes up in the same soil they scattered it across. The ground clears in you at the very moment it breaks open in them. That is why this one does not heal. A wound from the outside can close. You can recover from what was done to you. But this is not something done to them. This is them meeting themselves with nothing left to aim outward and no one left to perform for. You cannot charm your own reflection. You cannot manage your way out of a room that is only you. The tool that ran their whole life now runs only against them. And it does not have an off switch. For years, you carried this instead of them. The confusion was supposed to be yours. The instability was supposed to live in you. You lay awake with the noise that belonged to them. You questioned yourself with the doubt they authored. It was never your harvest to reap. You were holding a weight assigned to the wrong person, and the assignment is being corrected. What kept you up at night is settling where it was sown. You do not have to stand in that field anymore. You were only ever passing through it, carrying someone else's crop. Set it down. It was never yours. Number 5. The fake apology fails. Everything has failed them now. The charm, the stories, the circle, the quiet in their own head. But there was always one move left. The move they saved for the moment the walls closed in. The one that never failed. The apology. You know the one. Not a real apology. The performance of one. The sudden softness after the cruelty. The tears that arrived exactly when a consequence did. The voice going small and wounded. The words you had been begging to hear finally spoken, right at the edge of losing you. It was never about what they did. It was about resetting the room before the door could close. And it always worked. It worked on you for years. You would be standing at the end of your patience, finally certain, finally ready to walk, and they would reach for it. The soft eyes. The confession that sounded like growth. The promise that this time was different, and something in you that still hoped would sit back down. The reset button got pressed, and the whole thing started over, and you hated yourself a little for how well it worked. Watch them reach for it now. The situation is closing in. The people are drifting. The stories are surfacing. And they do what they have always done at this exact moment. They soften. They apologize. They become the wounded one, the misunderstood one, the person who only ever wanted to love and was met with cruelty. They flip the whole scene until they are the victim of it. They press the button, and no one moves. The apology that always reset everything lands in a room that has seen it too many times. The tears come, and the people who used to rush forward stay where they are. The confession is offered, and it meets the memory of the last confession, and the one before that, and the one before that. The button is being pressed, and nothing is turning over. The move that never failed is failing while they are still making it. They do this because the apology was never repair. Repair changes something. Repair means the behavior stops. What they offered was never designed to change anything, only to buy back the room long enough to keep going. It was a reset, not a repentance. And a reset only works while people have forgotten the last time it was used. The room has stopped forgetting. Everyone can see the shape of it now, the same softness at the same moment, arriving right on cue the instant a consequence appears. Named once, it can never be unseen. It looks like exactly what it is, a tactic, performed grief in the service of escape. There is no version of it left that works. If they rage, they prove the point. If they cry, The room remembers the last cry. If they go quiet and wounded, everyone can see the timing. Every exit they reach for now confirms the thing they are trying to escape. The performance has nowhere left to go because the audience has learned the script. They are trapped inside their own last move, running it again and again. And each time it lands harder against them than the silence would have. God is not deceived by any of it. He was never moved by tears meant to dodge a harvest. He sees the difference between a heart that breaks and a face that performs breaking. For years, that performance fooled the people around them. And it may have fooled you, but it never reached him. He knows what they are, under the softness aimed at the right moment. And he is no longer letting the performance buy the time it used to buy. The escape route is closed, not with thunder, but by simply letting everyone finally see it for what it always was. That is the fifth crack, and it is the cruelest one for them, because it takes their last exit. They can no longer charm. They can no longer explain. They can no longer summon the circle, and they can no longer perform their way back into the room. Every door they built has closed, and the one they saved for last has closed with them still inside it. Now, hear what this returns to you. For years, you carried the guilt of falling for it. You wondered how you kept going back, why you kept believing the softness. What was wrong with you that the reset kept working? Nothing was wrong with you. You were being worked by a tool built for exactly that, aimed by someone who had practiced it your whole relationship. You were not weak. You were being expertly played by a move designed to find the part of you that still hoped. That part of you was never the flaw. It was the good in you, being used against you, and it is not being used anymore. You are not the one sitting back down this time. You are not the one pressing rewind on your own escape. The move that held you for years has lost its grip on you, and now it is losing its grip on everyone. What kept you trapped is the very thing trapping them. You are already free of the thing that is closing around them. Number 6, the buried truth surfaces. You are believed. There is a crack forming in them that no one will ever be shown. Not the room, not the circle. Not the new person who does not know yet. Not even you. It is the one they buried the deepest. The thing under all the performance. And it is the thing the light is reaching last. They spent their whole life keeping it covered, underneath the charm, underneath the stories, underneath every managed room. There was always one thing they could not afford anyone to see. Not a secret event. Something worse. The knowledge of what they actually are. The awareness, kept in a place they never visit, that the whole life was a performance because there was nothing underneath it they believed anyone could love. Every tool they built was built to keep that one thing buried. The charm was a wall around it. The lies were a wall around it. You were, at times, a wall around it. And now every wall is down. The charm is gone, so it cannot distract from what is underneath. The stories are surfacing, so they cannot rewrite what is underneath. The room is quiet, so there is no reaction loud enough to drown it out. The escape is closed, so there is nowhere to run from it. One by one, every covering they used to keep from meeting themselves has been pulled away. And what is left is the one meeting they spent a lifetime avoiding. They are alone in a room with the thing they built everything to never see. That is the break that does not heal. Not because God will not let it, because there is nothing left to heal it with. The tool that fixed everything else was the performance, and the performance is what broke. You cannot perform your way back to a self you performed your whole life to avoid. There is no charm that reaches this. There is no story that covers it. There's no apology that resets it, and no audience left to press it on. For the first time, there is no move, only the thing itself and them, and no way out of the room. Scripture said this was coming long before they were born. It says the day is coming when God brings to light the things hidden in darkness. He makes plain the counsel of the heart, the real motive under the performance, the thing they kept behind every wall. And it does not end with the exposure. It says that on that day, each one receives their praise from God. The one who was true is named as true, out loud, by the only voice that was never fooled. The same light that strips them is the light that clears you. What is being made plain in them is being made plain for a reason, and the reason has your name in it, because here is what surfaces with it. The thing they buried the deepest was the truth about what they did to you, not their version, the real one. The one you started to doubt because they told it so differently, so many times, that your own memory began to feel unreliable. That truth was buried under everything, right beside the thing they could not face about themselves, because the two were always connected. What they did to you was the proof of what they are. To keep one hidden, they had to keep both hidden. And now, both are coming up. You did not dig it up. You could not have. You tried for years, and every time you reached for it, they buried it deeper and told you that you were the one holding a shovel for no reason. This was never yours to unearth. It was always his, and it is rising now the way a thing rises when the ground that held it down is finally removed. Not because you forced it, because the covering is gone, and buried things do not stay buried once the weight is lifted. And the person who was called a liar starts to be believed. It does not come as a courtroom. It comes as a phone call you were not expecting. Someone who took their side years ago calls out of nowhere. They repeated the story about you once, without checking it. Now there is a pause before they speak, because they are ashamed, and they say some version of the same thing. I should have listened to you. I see it now. I am sorry it took this long. You will have imagined that moment 100 ways. You will have rehearsed what you would say, built it into something, and when it finally comes, you will find you do not need the speech. The apology matters less than the fact underneath it. The truth walked all the way back to you on its own. It found the address. It knocked. You were not there when it turned, and you did not have to be. It reached them without you. Someone says the sentence you waited years to hear. I think you were telling the truth. Not everyone will say it. You do not need everyone. It comes from the ones who matter, the ones whose belief was taken from you by a story you could never compete with. The story cannot compete anymore. It is surfacing beside all its other versions in the same light, and yours is the one that holds its shape. Yours held its shape because yours was only ever describing what happened. Now answer the question you carried into this. You came in asking whether any of it mattered, whether your pain was real, whether your memory was sound, whether the truth would ever leave a mark you could see. Here is the mark. It is not their humiliation. It is the truth about you, coming out of the ground they buried it in, and being believed by the people it was hidden from. That is the judgment the title named, and this is the shape it takes. Not a punishment aimed at them from the sky, a covering removed, and everything under it coming into the light at once. It mattered, all of it. It always did. And the break in them is permanent for the same reason your vindication is. What is seen cannot be unseen. Once the room has met the truth about them, it does not unmeet it. Once you have been believed, that belief does not reverse. The same light that will not go back over them will not go back over you either. Their exposure and your vindication are the same event, moving in opposite directions, and neither one turns around. There was a job you thought was yours. For years, you believed you had to be the one to make people see it, to gather the proof, to keep the record, to find the right words in the right moment, so that finally someone would understand what was done to you. You lay awake, building the case. You carried the exhausting weight of being the only witness to a truth no one else would name. That was never your assignment. While you were building the case, the thing that broke in them was already breaking on its own. You did not have to prove the charm was fake. It stopped working without you. You did not have to expose the lies. The stories surfaced without you. Every crack you spent years trying to make people see is opening now on its own, and none of them close again. Set the case down. You are not the prosecutor, and you were never on trial. The clearing of your name is happening in a court you were never required to argue in. Scripture says, "He will bring your righteousness out like the light, and your vindication like the noonday sun." Not your effort, His. What you could not force into view is being lifted into view by the one who never needed your evidence to know the truth. You do not have to run back and show them. That is the pull now. Feel it and let it pass. The pull to return now that the cracks are showing and make sure they know you were right. Do not. The moment you go back to prove it, you pick the case back up and it becomes yours to carry again. The truth is doing better without you in the room. You do not have to expose them yourself. The exposure is not your work. It is being done more thoroughly than you could ever do it. And it is being done in a way that keeps your hands clean of it. What breaks in them this time does not grow back, and it does not need your help to break. If you reach in to push, you only become part of the story again. Stay out of it, and you remain what you always were, the one who was telling the truth. You do not have to keep watch over their collapse either. There is a version of freedom that is really just standing at the window, checking for the next crack, waiting to feel it settle. That is not freedom. That is a leash with more rope. You were shown all of this for one reason, and it was not so you could guard their unraveling for the rest of your life. It was so you could stop standing guard at all. Here is the quiet truth under everything. The loudest proof that the judgment is real is not anything happening to them. It is the peace you are living in right now. While their covering comes off, God is building something in you that does not need a single one of their cracks to be true. What breaks in them does not grow back. What is being rebuilt in you does not come apart. Those are the same verdict, written in opposite directions. You were never meant to prove it. You were meant to survive it and walk out and let the truth do what it was always going to do. It is doing it now. Your part is not the courtroom. Your part is the life on the other side of it. The clarity that came back, the peace they can no longer reach, the quiet that is finally yours and not the cold before another storm. Let them have the room. You have your life back, and no one can bury it again. The covering is off. You watched it come apart in order. The charm that stopped landing. The stories that stopped matching. The room that went quiet. The tools that turned inward. The escape that stopped working. And the thing they buried the deepest, coming into the light last. 6 cracks in the order they arrive, and not one of them grows back. This is the judgment, not a blow from the sky. A hand lifted, and everything they built with their own choices coming down under its own weight. They will not recover the way they recovered before. There is no charm left to rebuild it with. The tool that fixed everything else is the thing that broke. What is done, and it does not reverse. And it was never yours to fix, and never yours to mourn. And what came back to you does not reverse either. The clarity is yours now. The truth surfaced without you having to force it. Your name is being cleared in a court you did not have to argue in. What was buried is in the light, and light does not go back over the ground it has already touched. You were believed. That does not unhappen. You were telling the truth the whole time, and now the truth is standing on its own, without needing you to hold it up. You do not have to watch them fall to know it is real. You only have to live in the peace that is already yours, the peace they can no longer reach. That is the mark you were waiting for, not their ruin, your freedom. It arrived quietly, the way the deepest things do, and it is permanent. Let them have the room. You have your life back, and no one buries it again. If this reached something you have carried in silence, tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me the truth you were never believed about. Not for them, for the part of you that waited this long to say it out loud, to someone who would not look away. And if you need to hear this said with the certainty God says it, that what was done to you was seen, that it mattered, that the covering is off and your name is coming back into the light, subscribe and stay. There is more of this here. You do not have to keep standing guard alone. The judgment has begun. Your peace has the last word.